Reverend Green, and I hope that each rider will share a few minutes of their experience. I know it's unfair to ask it to be just a few minutes given the enormity of the experience, but we do want to leave one day. But if you could just tell us a little bit about your thoughts during the experience, what motivated you to do this, what you learned from that this sort of conversation help us get an essence of what.
You still got it, honey.
Somebody said I still got it.
All right, you got it.
Let me say just how pleased I am to be here with Eric and my colleagues who are part of that very challenging moment in the life of all of us, and in the life of this nation, to be sure. My name is Reginald Green. I was a student at Virginia Union in Richmond, Virginia, a small African-American college. The college also of the former governor, L. Douglas Wilder, you may know that. I had been involved as a student when I entered Virginia Union in 1960, when the sit-ins began. So my introduction to being an active participant in the civil rights movement begins there. Though I believe that because we are shaped by experiences, relationships through our lives, we evolve into who we become, and we make decisions based on how we have evolved. Thus, my involvement, I think, comes out of that whole context with the Freedom Rides. So in 1961, after learning, of course, of the bus being firebombed and all that transpired as a result of that, and that there were Freedom Riders going to jail, a friend of mine who happened to have been a colleague of mine at Virginia Union, who was also a member of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, named Charles Sherrod, was trying to get as many students at Virginia Union, his alma mater, to participate in the Freedom Rides. Three of us decided we'd go. A young man from Stamford, Connecticut named Raymond Randolph, a gentleman from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania named Obadiah Sims, who is deceased now, and I decided that we would go. Went through the few days of preparing yourself for what to do in case you were accosted or attacked. But we learned some of that during the sit-ins as well. And boarded a bus in Broad Street, 10th and Broad Street, a Trailway bus station, to catch a bus on the way to Mississippi, and eventually ended up in Jackson, Hinds County Jail, after being arrested in the Trailway bus station, carted off to the Hinds County Jail, and of course being processed in. You see those mugshots. That's how it happened. The question always is, why did you get involved? And that's a real complicated question, because as young students, we're motivated by so many things. Mine, I think, was just being caught up in the euphoria of the moment, the excitement of it, having gone through the sit-ins. This was another opportunity, maybe not the best word to use, but another challenge to get involved. And so that's why it happened with me. I spent 20-some days there in Hinds County, and as well Parchment. Of course, we were in maximum security. We went through the experience of having our mattresses taken. I was hit with the billy club on my finger because I spilled some milk in the cell. Those are just little things that went on. So I got involved, I think, because I remember the imperative of Immanuel Kant that says you do what you ought to do. You do what you do because you ought to, is categorical imperative. And so that's why I think I got involved, plus the excitement of it. Now, the interesting caveat with me is I did not tell my parents that I was going. The story's in the book about what happened, how that happened, to make it very short, because we got on a few moments to say it. My father learned through a reporter from the Evening Star newspapers, is no longer in existence in the nation's capital. A reporter got a listing, I suppose, of names, contacted my father. My father shared with me that he had asked him if he had a son named Reginald Green, who was attending Virginia Union University in Richmond, Virginia. And my father, instead of just answering the question, yes, he wanted to volunteer more. You know, as so often we do. You ask a question, you want to volunteer everything else, but answer the question. He said, the reporter said, Mr. Green, I need to come see you to explain to you. And when he got with my father, he shared with him, because my father said he's working in Richmond, he won't be home this summer, because he's got to return back to school, only to find out from the reporter that I was in jail in Mississippi. And so the why, I still wrestle with it. The regret, no. Do I cherish the experience? Yes. Number one, it increased my understanding of human wholeness and helped shape even my whole context of ministry in the world. So we'll deal with some questions when you get through all this.
White, and I'm not a native of New Haven, but I grew up here. So I'm very happy to be back among home folk to tell you what I did and why I did it. When the Freedom Rides began, I was 22 years old. I had received my bachelor's degree from the University of Chicago, and I had also spent a year working as a teacher, 4th grade and 5th grade at James Ward Elementary School. But when the Freedom Ride started, the second I saw the picture of the burned out bus, I knew that I had a responsibility. I had a responsibility to do something. Also, I was a history major, and I was used to reading about people, individuals, and groups, and movements that had changed the world. So I felt change was possible if enough people were eager to go out and do something to change it. I left Chicago with 2 other people. One I knew, one I did not know. One was a young mother of 2 children. And we traveled to Nashville, where we had nonviolence training, where we learned what to do, what to expect if someone hit us, how to react under given certain circumstances. And we stayed there a full day, and the next day we went to Montgomery, where we stayed at Reverend Abernathy's house. And there we were met by 6 young men from New York. And the 9 of us, the following morning, got on a bus and rode to Jackson, Mississippi, where we were promptly arrested. And it was really strange today seeing a picture of Captain Ray. He's the man who arrested you and me and you. I think he lived at the train station. The bus station, really. I was also in maximum security, although I did not meet Reverend Green, because the male was in the same cell with me because she was white. She was in a cell, I think it was next to mine, with another white woman. And I was put in a cell with a very brave black woman in her 30s, I guess, because she had 3 children, and her husband was taking care of them for the summer. And he was a composer, a music composer. And she was my cellmate for July and August. When you mentioned your father, it reminded me of a question that was asked of me a few weeks ago. And the question was, what did you tell your parents? Well, I was 22, so I didn't have to ask for permission. But I did write a postcard telling my father that if you can't find me in the next couple of months, I'll be in jail in Mississippi. But it was, I'm almost tingling thinking about what we did, what nerve we had. It wasn't courage, it was nerve. But I think it was more than nerve. I think it was also a belief that we could help make change for ourselves. We didn't have to wait for Washington to do it. We didn't have to wait for the Kennedys to do it. In fact, I was sort of angry with the Kennedys because they were sort of cool on the question of the freedom riders at first. So I did it for me. Thank you.
Well, I think that in my early life, I'm aware of incidents. First of all, learning from my mother, at least she talked the talk of everybody being equal. But then one weekend, I was in boarding school in high school, and Julian Bond's cousin was in my dormitory, Jane, and we were good friends. And I called my mother and I said, I'd like to bring Jane home for the weekend. Could you write a note to whoever you had to write to get permission? And there was a pause, and then she said, can't you think of someone else? And I was devastated. I remember that I went into my room and just sobbed. It was sort of like, my God, I thought she meant what she said, and she didn't. And Jane did come home with me, and I still remember this as sort of maybe my last moment of innocence, that I grew up in Lowell, Massachusetts, and we went downtown to go to a movie, and I began to notice that people were looking at us. And to this day, I'm amazed that I had no idea why. I mean, I just didn't get it. And then I did get it. And so this is sort of a little bit of background just as to kind of how I felt about things. And my freedom ride started off very accidentally and unintentionally. I had gone to the Corps office at the suggestion of a friend who said, Rabbi so-and-so, who's a friend of mine, is going to be talking to James Farmer, and the rabbi just was in a civil rights event in Florida, and you might like to meet him. Just, he knew I was very interested. So I went, and I was waiting for him, sitting on a bench in the Corps office, and a man said to me, can you type a letter for me? And being somewhat compliant and, wanting to help, I said sure. So I was typing the letter, and I kind of got hired as a volunteer. And what happened then was, I was 20. I had my 21st birthday in jail, and it was before my last year in college in New York. I was going to Columbia School of General Studies. And so I was working in the office, and we were doing a telethon to raise money for the Freedom Rides. And one by one, a small group of young black men from the South came to New York to talk to Jim Farmer and be part of the telethon. And I had never met anyone like them or known that anybody like them existed. And what I mean by that is they were I don't know how to say very Christian, but I mean they were sort of dedicated in a way. They had meaningful Christian upbringings and backgrounds and community involvement. They were very sort of self-effacing, unheroic in their demeanor. They had a sweetness and a commitment. They had all tried to register voters. I mean, they had all been active in voter registration and sit-ins. They'd all been beaten or hurt, in significant ways. I remember one man had a concussion and been hospitalized. And as I talked to them, it was a very unthoughtful process. It was sort of like in a very seamless way that I wasn't even aware of. I just shifted from being an observer to a participant. It was, and it just happened like that. And there was just no question in my mind. And because I worked at CORE, I knew exactly what would happen when I went because we had all these reports. And I have to say that I was not a very assertive person. I wasn't, somebody who ever would go toward conflict if I could possibly avoid it. But none of that seemed to matter. And I wasn't going to tell my father was dead, but my mother was alive and remarried. And I didn't want to tell them because I was afraid they would somehow get in my way. But the night before I went, I thought it was the right thing to do, so I called. And my sister, whom I did tell that I was going, we worked out a code with biblical names. So, because I knew the mail was going to be censored, and so I could tell her if I was being beaten or starving or if everything was okay. And and I'll just say that before being arrested, when I did stop in Nashville, we picketed with a group of black students, and they knew how dangerous it was, so that they always had a community member ready, available to come get them. And what I saw was one of the eye-opening things that happened, which was that the police came by. We were picketing a supermarket, and they left their police cars with the lights flashing so that it would draw crowds, which it did. And there were a bunch of people there with knives and eggs. I have a picture of me with an egg in my hair. And I remember us being told, take the placard off your neck so they won't strangle you. And if they attack one of the black male students, all the women circle around him because they might not attack you the way they would him. So that was sort of my first taste of, what it was like to have the system invite violence against you. And